My guest this week is Elpida Rouka, Senior Political Affairs Officer with the United Nations. Welcome, Elpida. It's great to be with you in our radio studios in Geneva.
Thank you, Melissa, and it's good to see you again, and in Geneva, as you say, and good to reunite.
I know it's been a long time. When did we last see each other? It must have been when I was at UNHCR.
So. Yes. Well, right before you left, I think, sometime 2019 probably.
Yeah. Well, I remember you were always a big supporter of the refugee cause, and maybe we'll get into that because I think it's also personal. And but first, I want to talk about you, and you've worked for the UN. It's getting on to 25 years. And you've served in some very challenging places, but I want to start by asking you about something that happened to you right at the beginning of your career. When you were serving in Iraq, you were present at the devastating attack on the UN compound at the Canal Hotel in Baghdad. This is when a truck loaded with explosives deliberately targeted the UN mission, and 22 of your colleagues, our colleagues, were killed. Can I ask you, how old were you then, and what was your job in Iraq at that time?
Yes, absolutely. Just by way of context, I'm Greek-born with roots in Asia Minor and Greek Macedonia, and I joined the UN straight out of college and grad school in Columbia University in New York. My first job lands me in the Middle East with the Office of the Iraq Program at the time. And that August 2003, 19th of August, I happened to be with the executive director in Iraq because we're closing down the program, the Offer Food program, as per Security Council and U.S. decision.
Yeah, it was just a few months after the U.S. coalition toppled Saddam Hussein. You were working in New York. How did you feel about being sent to Iraq?
I asked to go, actually, and because sometimes I can be relentless in asking what I think is right for me to be doing. The executive director relented. Obviously, there was a lot of guilt afterwards about, oh my God, what would have happened had you at that moment, been unlucky enough or lucky enough to be in one place over the other.
Well, of course, you couldn't have anticipated that the UN office that was based in the Canal Hotel was going to be targeted. What do you remember when you walked into work that fateful day at the Canal Hotel in Baghdad?
I mean, remembrance is a funny thing, right? But I have replayed it and replayed it over for so many years now. But it was our last day. It was supposed to be our last day in Iraq. We had just come back from the northern Iraqi governorates. And I remember entering the compound. I took a picture of the UN flag that ended up being the one that survived the blast and was then framed. And that picture down the line, it was digitalized. When it came out, it was blurred. It was very odd, right? Yes, exactly, eerie in some ways. So I entered the compound, I think about 3:30 or so, and me and my colleague, Darko Mojibub, we were trying to get permission to go to downtown Baghdad. We had not seen Baghdad in all this time that we were trying to, work out how you close this humongous humanitarian program. And obviously the executive director, Bernard Savas, said absolutely not. This is not, a place to be doing, conflict tourism, if you may. So I was sitting in my office, which was actually right below Sergio's, the one side of the building that you see collapse into the ground. And Bernard Savas wanted to have his meeting with then the late David Navarro in the office across the corridor where Ramiro's office. Because he had a coffee machine and a balcony and whatever not. So anyway, and then he said, you guys are free, so let's not, Elpida, you don't need to be in this meeting. And literally 5 minutes later, he walked in and said, you know what, why not? It's the last meeting I have. Why don't you come in? And literally, I crossed the corridor, looked left, saw my friend Marwan, Ali, and Rick Cooper. Walked into the meeting. That's about 4 o'clock. 10, 15 minutes later, I saw David Nabar's assistants, like his eyes like diluting. Because you first you feel the shake and the light, and then the blast, the sound comes. And the next thing I know, I'm on the floor because Benon just put us in. I walk out and there's this precipice right in front.
Where your office was.
That's right. And where Bjorn and the other close protection were like straight into the rubbles you've seen now many a times in trying to find out where Sergio and the others were trapped. I don't remember. I still am blacked out between my exiting the building, but when I was out, there was just a massacre just a scene of a massacre, and the only thing I recall after that was being thrown a phone and say, call your parents now. And it was just the luckiest thing that could have happened at that moment. Otherwise, I think my parents would have been in another situation. And that was it. And a few hours later, I was in the last sort of triage hospital of a military compound when we also heard the news of Sergio's passing.
Just because I know that all of us at the UN know who
Sergio
Vieira de Mello is,
sorry,
but there
yes,
may be
indeed.
people. It's been a while.
Sergio Vieira de Mello, the head of the UN political mission at the time in Iraq, and obviously formerly human rights.
He was a legend.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. Very high-profile, beloved figure.
Indeed.
And just to repeat, your office was just below his office.
That's
His
right.
office was hit. He fell into the rubble. There were hours and hours of attempts to rescue him and to pull him out.
Yeah.
Had you not been invited into that meeting, you would have suffered the same fate. It must have been absolutely shocking to see what you saw, to lose who you lost.
It was, and I think, but I didn't realize it for a very long time afterwards. So I delved straight back into work, even when I was for the first time told you're not essential. But I didn't know what this meant. It was so hard to comprehend. I mean,
you were 25 years old.
I was 25 years old.
Were you injured at all?
I was, but not as seriously, obviously, as others. But certainly, there's a mark, other than the physical, emotional mark that reminds me, and of course the scorch and shrapnel, laissez-passer, which was the only thing that was recovered.
Your UN passport.
That's my UN passport, my first UN passport, and the only, just as you see the age of innocence, this is my picture at the age of 25.
And that was recovered, it was in your office?
It was in my office, yes. So no other belongings survived except for this and some broken glasses, but yes. And that was returned to me in New York months later in a pouch. So,
I hate to ask you this, but did you lose friends or close colleagues?
Yes, of course. Yes, we all did. And even if they weren't friends, then they became friends afterwards in many ways. So
they were, for all of us, friends. It was, for the UN, it was the worst thing that had happened. The UN had never been attacked that devastatingly. And I just wonder, I mean, you mentioned that you kind of just went back to work, and although you had physical injuries, you weren't really thinking about the effect on your psyche. But you remember your feelings, during those days.
Yes, I think what I can now say with confidence, retrospectively, and because of other things I have suffered since, I had very serious PTSD, but I didn't know what that meant.
You lived with it, and we'll talk about.
Yes, but I think it was more, being in sort of perpetual and extended shock and denial, and just going with emotions. I felt later on when I returned to Iraq 4 years later, I never thought I would, by the way, but I also saw it as perhaps closure at the time. And that provided some emotional healing, but certainly not mental health healing, if you may.
So you chose to, continue working for the UN, but you chose not to stay in a safe UN headquarters in New York or Geneva or Vienna. You went back to Iraq. What was it like when you arrived there?
It was very emotional, but in ways that can also not make sense at the time. I should preface it by saying that in 2003 I lost my age of innocence, and there were a lot of things that didn't make sense, but they made sense later. Actually far later. They made sense mostly in Afghanistan and afterwards. But as I said, it was emotional, and I kind of, despite having sort of scoffed at those who said, Elpida, you're going back to Iraq, I said, oh yeah, well, I am back, yes, indeed. In some ways, it was almost like I also owed it to maybe, it sounds perhaps a little too soft, but yes, I was imagining what had those friends who had chosen to go in 2003 been alive at the time, what would they have done?
Are you still in contact with other survivors?
Yes, of course. And of course, we see each other in every anniversary, though the word anniversary, I don't know, it's befitting of...
it's World Humanitarian Day, which
well,
is
yes, indeed, yes.
commemorated, yeah. I wonder how you think the attack changed the UN.
I think both in good and bad ways. I think in some ways, yes, the bad is the obvious one, right? That there was a realization that the UN blue flag is no longer sacred, that the peoples of the world do not believe in the charter of what it is that we're purported to be doing, the principles we talk about. And that obviously gave, it was a symptom of many things, right? But it, in some ways, and this is a debate that continued for years and still is, I presume, not just because of Iraq. In some ways, we became more bunkerized than before and barricaded than before, because now it's about the safety and security. And I'm not saying that's not correct, but it took us a lot of years, and still does, to get the balance right. And the good thing is, I think in many ways it triggered a lot of debates about, internal debates about what it is we serve, what is our purpose in many ways. It was more like recalibration in many ways. And how do you, I suppose, close the conundrum of serving the peoples you're mandated to and challenging the very member states that mandated you to do so. And then it created an esprit de corps that, I grew up in the UN, right? I mean, this was my awakening in many ways. So that bond became stronger, and it also it was not just sort of forcing us to realize the responsibility that we have, but it's actually telling us you don't have the right to not try. I mean, we read the preamble the other day, and we always focus on we the peoples too, but the verb the preamble uses is determined.
The preamble of the UN Charter.
Of the UN Charter,
it says,
yes.
We the people.
We the people determined. I mean, the verb is determined. It's not the thinking we may try, right? So
it's not aspire, it's not try, it's we the people are determined.
Correct.
To
prevent the future generations from the scourges of war. And that's what I think to many of us that moment in 19th of August brought us back to realizing.
You carry the UN Charter with you?
Yes, this is my own first one, or the second one actually, because it was reprinted. But yes, and it also has you will appreciate this, because this is a UN Brussels unique picture in front of the Acropolis. So it's my country.
It's a UN flag.
Yes,
in front of the Acropolis.
Yes.
What is that year?
It was 60 years of the UN, so basically Brussels unique, and it was reprinted in Greek.
A UN information center.
That's right.
So you escaped from that hotel with minor physical injuries, as you said, but you kind of alluded to a deeper emotional toll.
Yes.
What was that?
I mean, obviously, as I said, I didn't stop after 19th of August 2003. I went from Iraq to Afghanistan. Obviously, witnessed a lot of, a major loss of colleagues in Afghanistan as well.
Also,
Mazar Sharif.
What happened there?
Well, it's a long story. It was a complex attack, suicide bombing attack, and other things in a compound of in Mazar. It was an angry crowd that had anti-American sentiments, but it became we were the obvious compound that was there to attack. But then I went to Palestine, and then I moved from Palestine to Syria for 10 years. And, all this, exposure to, of course, trauma, suffering, loss underlies all the challenges we see in the conflict around us. But we also forget, or at least I forgot until I didn't, that the aid worker, the mediator, the practitioners also come with their own personal trauma. And when those realities align, it becomes, in some ways it could become good in the sense of, that's the thing about trauma, it transcends age and circumstance and positions and war. So in fact, if you're able to recognize the other's pain, then maybe we're getting somewhere with the work we're doing. But more specifically, 10 years ago this year, I suffered a personal tragedy. I lost my beloved younger brother to suicide, and the world ended. And, for someone who purported to be a Supergirl, by the way, that was his coined phrase for me. And that's why my grieving journal is called Supergirls Don't Grieve. It comes from a Raymond song, Supergirls Don't Cry, for those who know the 90s. And I thought, I was on the top of my game career-wise. I had, as we just established, been bombed and shot at and seen colleagues die, and I thought I was saving humanity. And then, this tragedy pulled all kinds of latent PTSD and all kinds of war conflict-related trauma and generational trauma. And I grew up with the glitterati of peacekeeping. In some ways, I had by that time been a glitterati myself, in the sense that people would think that I always said I had come to have an illustrious career because I was obviously, serving high office in very high-profile and consequential conflicts. But as we know, all that glitters is not gold.
You lose your brother. Suddenly,
yes.
it would be a trauma for anyone. You were very close to him, right? What was his name?
Yanis. John.
Yanis. And that, I saw you've written about your trauma. So you've processed it also through writing and publishing also about it.
Yeah.
But as you said, you not only had your deep grief for losing him, but it really brought to the surface what you had been suppressing all those years following the bombing. What happened to you? How did you deal with it?
Well, I must say, again, surprisingly, for having gone through something similar in different ways, I also threw myself back to work, right? And shock and awe and denial for several months until someone sent me an article by Dean Yates. He's a very vocal about moral injury and trauma in war-torn zones. He was a journalist in Iraq who also suffered PTSD and got voluntarily hospitalized. And so the article was about PTSD, and someone asked me, do you think... And I said, are you suggesting I have PTSD? And I said, no, I'm suggesting I do. But, that kind of triggered... and I still was in shock and denial until, I reached a very low moment when I asked for help. I said, I can't,
You wrote
I
that you
can't
had
survive
lost
this.
tons of weight.
Oh, yes, I had lost lots of weight.
Not sleeping.
I was having nightmares asleep and nightmares awake. I was, hanging on by threads. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't listen to music. I couldn't, because it was all association. I've tried all kinds of therapy. I even tried bibliotherapy, but I couldn't read because it was triggering all kinds of images. It was a very acute stage. The reality is the first responder was a Lebanese in the Geneva crisis center, whose first question was, how come you haven't, you didn't, in your line of work, you didn't know that you have PTSD and severe depression, and why it took you so long to come here? Yeah, it just tells you a lot.
Oh, there was a Lebanese at the clinic.
Yes.
Lebanese have gone through their share of trauma.
I know. Another sign that, at least, years later, actually, we ran into each other and we were able to laugh about all these things. In a black humor kind of way. Yeah. But trauma does bring humor, I must tell you. It does. It's
well, it's probably all the deep emotions that allow you to, if you face it,
yes,
to feel rather than avoiding the pain. You're facing it when you go through the treatment, right?
Well, yes. It depends what your treatment is. I'm as I said, I've tried all kinds of therapy, including pharmacotherapy and talk therapy. Pharmacotherapy had stopped a few months after. talk therapy I'm not big at. Although I did find one therapist from San Diego, belongs to the older generation of the people who talked to me about the book The Body Keeps the Score and stuff like that. Her name was Priscilla, so I used to call her Priscilla, Queen of My Desert, as opposed to the movie Queen of the Desert. But beyond that, I as you said, I mostly found. True to type, they the therapist in the clinic misread my personality. It was very type A, so they challenged me the first day. They said, "Oh, it's okay. We've seen worse." And I said, "Oh, well, then let me show you." Very unpsychological.
You kind of deceived them into thinking you weren't
well, I don't know if
bad.
I deceived them, but the problem is, and this is the most interesting part of. Not the most interesting, but one interesting part was, I found myself having to explain myself in 4 languages because I was in a clinic in Switzerland, right? And of course, as you know, as psychology will tell you, all the deep emotions you instantly want to communicate in your own native language, right? But I did find some words in French that, like cauchemar, which really were evocative of what I was feeling. But the most interesting realization at some point was that despair in French is désespoir, which literally means without hope. Hope is my name.
Elpida means hope.
Elpida means hope in Greek. So it was literally without hope and without self, which was, when you're in the depths of despair or désespoir, it's quite a moment to have that realization about one's self and where do you hold on to. But the short version of it is, I came out of it in ways that I don't think I would have imagined were possible. And I was, again, to use the word determined, and that's why I've been vocal about it. I was determined that suicide will not have the last word on my brother, and neither will depression on mine. So that's why I have no qualms discussing those issues. And also because, again, in some ways, I have a responsibility in the sense of I've had a very good career, and if I'm not able to say these things in my position, right, how would others come out? I mean, the stigma is still real. We know this. We've come a long way, but it's still very real. Not always because of people actively want to stigmatize you. It's just the fear of not being able to relate to that pain. To each one's pain, not that pain, but mine in particular, right?
Isn't it a bit also, I worked for UNHCR for 10 years, and what I found often with the colleagues was that they were just seeing so much suffering around them from people surviving wars and leaving with terrible losses, and that they just felt like, well, nothing that I am suffering is anywhere close to what they are suffering. Absolutely. So a little bit of that.
Oh, a lot of that. Which is also not fair, I think, because you can't, obviously you can't, it's fair in the sense of how can you compare it to that amount of, but it's also not fair to the individual to minimize one's own suffering. It was very important to also say that trauma is not only conflict-related trauma. There's so many different ways that people experience trauma on a daily basis in your respective surroundings, and it's not all and only by wars. But of course, that's amplified 1,000 more times, right? Because you also have the additional issue of guilt and survivor's guilt and all the things we know come with being particularly an aid worker in the front lines and witnessing the things you just mentioned.
Mm-hmm. It's very complex.
It is very complex,
it's very
indeed.
complex, and yet it's still so compelling to work for the UN and to find
Absolutely.
hope, to find
Yes.
hope as your name symbolizes. And I just want to ask you. I mean, it was maybe you said that your name was kind of ironic at the time when you were getting your trauma treatment, but what has your name meant for you beyond and maybe before that?
Well, I have to blame my parents for giving me this name. Obviously, they had a plan for my survival, I suppose. But
weren't you named after your grandmother?
I was named after my grandmother, who was an early day IDP. I have this Pinta who will explain.
IDP.
Yes,
Internally
in displaced person.
person.
So she was an early day displaced person. She was only less than a month old when the family had to, in 1922, the Greeks of Asia Minor were forced to flee Smyrna, nowadays called Izmir. On the boat to mainland Greece, there was a priest who baptized her because she hadn't yet been baptized, Elpida, which means hope, in the hope that they will return to their lands, which they never did. La Doña Elpida, as I will call her, who also incidentally raised me and my brother because my parents were working really hard to make a life for themselves and for us, is part of the reason and many reasons that I do what I do.
So her displacement experience, you think, has had an effect on your
absolutely
path.
Because, and again, things that are not evident to you when you're growing up. Of course, I come also from, I said I'm Greek born with roots in Asia Minor, but I was born in Thessaloniki, which is the mother of refuge. Actually, the city is called that because most of the refugee waves in 1922 came either to Thessaloniki or, mind you, Aleppo, Syria. So we have that connection too. Only later, at her funeral, actually, when I saw the huge line of people who showed up in our house with no idea who they are, that I realized how much, behind the scenes work my grandmother was doing as with the most vulnerable. And most vulnerable don't have to be, at the global level in another country. They can be your neighbors.
So she was helping to raise you so your parents could work, but she was also reaching out to people in the community who were poor.
That's right. I ended up getting my first job in the UN because in the transition between my graduation and my future world, I was working for a UN professor who was doing peacekeeping training with UNITAR at the time.
Coming back to today and these days, what keeps you awake at night?
Not just these days, but definitely, have I done enough? Have I done enough in the sense of wars don't stop because it's the weekend? Have I done enough given the weight of what I know I've been witness to in terms of suffering? Have I done enough in the sense of determined to, right? Humanitarian problems need political solutions, not humanitarian solutions. Have I done enough in the sense of, I have a favorite line. I don't know if you ever watched Hamilton, the musical.
Yes, I did.
So
twice.
Yes, I can imagine. There's one lyric that says, who lives, who dies, who gets to tell your story. So have I had enough in that? And last but not least, have I done enough with basically not letting up, not being complacent, and stressing that war is not inevitable, but neither is peace. Peace is a choice. It's just harder to build it and keep it. So,
well, you still, even though you've been at the UN for 25 years, you still have a long way to go until they force you to retire. So I think you're very humble. I think you've done an incredible amount, and you've dedicated yourself entirely to the UN and to the UN Charter. And, really to Syria, which has been a country that has had a terrible civil war and produced millions of refugees, and now has undergone a transformation. And, you served there. You also served here, working for the office that was working for this day in a way. So what gives you hope when you think about Syria?
First and foremost, the Syrians themselves. And this does not only apply on Syria, it applies on every other conflict or war or trauma-inflicted country that I've engaged in. And I think more so than saying Syrian-owned, Syrian-led, or Iraqi-owned, Iraqi-led, or Afghan, this is what it means. It's their future. So all we can do is to help them grab the opportunity of having the agency to build your own future.
I mean, you've seen so much carnage, so much suffering. How do you still manage to be hopeful?
Human connection. I just mentioned the Syrian people, my friends in Syria and outside Syria, stood by me at my lowest in many cases, I suppose. And yes, it's all the, as I said, if you're able to recognize the other's pain, and then we are indeed getting somewhere. I mean, this is, we didn't talk about this, I always, my parents were always laughing at me every time they would ask me, Elpida, what is it you do? Right? And then they would be like, okay, don't tell me. You're in another meeting. You have another gathering. It's, But I think Bill Burns put it best. Diplomacy is one of the most misunderstood professions, even if it is the oldest. But it's precisely all the forging and sustaining of relationships of trust across divisive narratives, and being able to, even if you know that how the world works is a dismal, not a pretty sight, you at least do not let that dismal reality trump principles, as you said. And when the world needs most is to have open channels of communication. Given
everything that you've been through, if you were your 25-year-old self, would you choose to do it again?
Absolutely. Unapologetically, yes.
And would you encourage others to serve?
I would. With a caveat, there's always a cost. So you have to, not take everything so much to heart at the beginning. Breathe.
Breathe and seek help when something terrible happens.
Seek help even before it happens, I would say.
I think you're going to help a lot of people who are serving in difficult places and in the UN just by telling your story and opening up.
Thank you, Elsa. I hope so.
Oh, absolutely. I think so many of our colleagues have gone through a lot of trauma.
Absolutely.
And it's like they say in the airplane, you need to put the oxygen mask on first. Before you
exactly. You got to be your own superhero for a second.
That's right, before you can help others. Thank you so much, Elpida.
Thank you, Melissa. I appreciate it.